This is Partners in Crime with Adam Croft and Robert Dawes.
It's been a funny old week, Bob, hasn't it?
It's been hilarious.
I say that for a number of reasons, which we'll get on to shortly, but we are now on episode 60, somehow, madly.
Oh, 60 eps today, 60 eps today, and we've got the key of the door, etc., etc. That's enough of that. It's a little musical interlude.
Thought I'd leave a nice awkward silence at the end.
That's it. I can hear people turning off.
Well, one of the reasons it's been a funny old week, we're going to get into some quite serious industry chatter.
I can see your furrowed brow, in preparation for this.
These are things about the crime writing industry and writing in general that readers probably generally aren't aware of. And we do try to open up the industry to readers a little bit and let them know what goes on behind the books and all the other things that go on. Something that cropped up pretty interestingly, actually, on Saturday night. There was a tweet that went out by the Crime Writers Association, the CWA, which is a club, I guess, for crime writers.
Yes, I am a member.
Yes, they are open to traditionally published crime authors. Quite famously, a bit of a closed shop when it comes to indie authors. And they have recently put out some pretty interesting tweets. There was one which I've not seen or been able to find. I think it's been deleted, but somebody told me when a reader had asked about joining the Crime Writers Association, they had been not so politely directed to the non-existent Crime Readers Association.
Oh.
Quite publicly on Twitter, and a tweet went up on Saturday night, which has now been deleted, but which I did save and have here in front of me, from the CWA, saying, "Fun fact, if you tag the Crime Writers Association into a tweet and you're not a member, don't be surprised when I don't acknowledge or retweet you," with a smiling face and an action next to it that says "smiles sweetly." That got a lot of response from a lot of crime authors, including Claire McIntosh, who came out and said, "The crime writing community is inclusive and welcoming. Your tweet is either badly written, how ironic, or intentionally elitist. Either way, it's disappointing."
Right.
And I can't view the rest of the replies. Actually, that's the only one that I got in my screenshots. I think Rebecca Bradley also mentioned that not only did the CWA not include indie authors, they will outright ignore you on social media, and they're proud of that fact. Oh, and readers, they'll ignore readers because they're not members, Rebecca Bradley said. So it all kicked off a little bit on Twitter, and I did join in myself and put the boot in, because I really don't like forms of elitism when it comes to things like that, especially when it's completely misplaced, because the vast majority of indie writers will completely outsell the traditional ones.
Well, yeah, I mean, and you know of what you speak. I mean, it's interesting. I'm a member of CWA. I think they're an extraordinarily good organisation, and what they do is terrific. But I don't know what's going to happen. I've been legitimately, as some people would say, traditionally published. Now that's an interesting slip. That legitimately published. That sounds. But if I have two of my books have been published by a publisher, and therefore I gain entry to festivals and invited to festivals, and a member of the CWA. My next book is going to be independently published, because I've come round to thinking that I actually prefer it. I mean, for many different reasons, but the benefits for me and suiting my temperament is that publishing independently is far better for me than a traditional publisher.
Well, this is an interesting thing, because I've done both. I have traditional publishing contracts as well, so I am perfectly eligible to join the CWA, but I won't on a point of principle, because of the way they exclude authors and the way they treat many authors and readers, frankly.
And why is this done? And why is it done with an awful lot of festivals? And why is it done by? It's a question of indie authors. The argument is, it's quality. I mean, anyone can publish a book, and the quality is so bad. But of course, that doesn't take into consideration the number of hugely successful indie authors. But even with them, I've read tweets and emails from people people saying, well, they may be making money and maybe they're just marketing, their books aren't very good. But surely there must be hundreds of books published by traditional publishers around the world in all sorts of genres that simply aren't very good.
Of course.
And the one cry I get from an awful lot of authors who are published, a lot of my friends, is they haven't got the marketing.
No.
And the onus is increasingly on them to actually go out there, do the marketing and do everything themselves. So from the sheer nuts and bolts of actually publishing a book as an indie publisher, this idea of getting a huge support as regards marketing from a big publisher only goes to a very, very few people. And that's not necessarily the people who write the best books.
No, I mean, nobody's suggesting that all indie authors should be able to speak at Crime Fest or at Harrogate or whatever, or that it should be open up as a free-for-all.
Yes.
It should be the biggest sellers, the biggest names, the authors with the biggest followings, the people that the readers and the audience want to hear from. Completely agree. And I think my argument is that is not always the traditionally published names. And if you exclude the big-name indies, you are missing out on... Well, it will kill the festivals. This is my concern. I want these festivals to survive, and if they're only focusing on kind of 30% of the industry, then how can they possibly expect to survive? You know, as indie authors, you know, I'm asked constantly, why am I not appearing at this festival? Why have I not been asked to do that? The number of readers and tickets that would be sold, were they to open it up, would be phenomenal. And I wonder if it's a little bit of kind of head in sand and knowing that these things are going downhill a little bit, and therefore kind of backing themselves into a corner and not wanting to open up. But a lot of festivals have opened up massively and are doing extraordinarily well for it. It's an odd thing, and you know, at the end of the day, it's more of a philosophical concern for me. I think that some of these organisations and some of these festivals are closed shops because, as I say, you know, being traditionally published as well, I could join them, I could do them. I choose not to because I choose to take a stand and to say, you know, if this is the way you are treating friends of mine, yes, I'm not playing a part of it. And I subscribe to the Groucho Marx theory when he said, I don't care to belong to any club that will have me as a member.
Well, I have to consider the clubs that you're a member of very carefully before I join them. It's got to be said. But so, well, there we are. I mean, obviously, this is all sort of new to me, and because you're a leading authority or for indie writers in many areas, this is something that resonates with you very, very strongly. And I understand. For me, I mean, my own for years, Equity were a closed shop for actors. And they're not anymore. Anyone can become an actor. Anyone can become a writer. And for years there was this thing of, the quality and whatever. Well, you know, there's still a union there which people can join and get all the benefits of being with the Equity Union, and there are many benefits of that. But it still doesn't stop the best writers coming, the best actors coming to the fore, just because the profession is open. And I still hear people sort of saying, it's never been the same, and there are arguments for that, but at the end of the day, this closed shop it sort of works against the industry. This idea that indie writers' books are not very good because they haven't been through the process of editorship and whatever. The indie writers I know who are all doing particularly well, I have to say, treat it absolutely as a business. They're out. They've got their editors. They've got their publicity people. They're on social media. They're doing everything the publisher would normally do. And I also know an awful lot of very happy authors who are happily published and have a wonderful relationship with these top professional people. Which, let's face it, the publishing industry is full of the top very, very talented people.
Yeah, both need to live side by side quite happily. As you say, the traditional model is great because not everybody wants to effectively run a publishing company and be an author. Some people just want to do the writing of the books. I completely understand that, and that's why I think both should be living side by side, which is why that snobbery shouldn't be there. The quality argument's an interesting one because it's hogwash basically. Any self-respecting indie author will use the exact same editors, the exact same cover designers as the traditional publishers.
And if the book's no good, no one will read it.
No, my editors work with numerous big publishers. Like cover designer, I've worked with HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster. They've been in the industry for years. This is not a case of just doing it yourself and taking shortcuts. In fact, my reason for doing things is to always try and put out a better quality product than traditional publishers will. So, of course, there are going to be writers out there who will, just put things out there themselves and design their own cover, and those things don't get out there, they don't sell well, they don't perform, and therefore those writers do not float to the top, and they're not even in the topic of conversation that we're having because they're not doing things properly, and perhaps rightly so. But the fact is, you can't ignore this and pretend it's not happening. You can't pretend that indie writers aren't now the majority of the industry. You can't pretend that readers don't care and are devouring our books like there's no tomorrow because they love what we're doing. And you can't pretend the industry hasn't changed because it has. And it's for example, even the Society of Authors now is completely open to independent authors. And you can join the Society of Authors, which was the biggest closed shop in the industry for a long time, and had a meeting with the chief executive of the Society of Authors not so long ago.
Yes, I met him as a nice chap.
Woman.
Oh no, I met him. I met her deputy.
Met her deputy.
That's right.
We haven't gone right.
He's not a nice woman. He's a jolly nice chap.
yes, and it's. And even they've opened up, and lots of different organisations have and are reaping the benefits of doing so. But there are still some who have backed themselves into a corner and are pretending that this hasn't happened. And it kind of reminds me of, do you remember back in the early days of the Iraq War when Saddam Hussein's military chief was standing on top of this building saying to the camera crews, "No, it's all a lie, there are no American tanks in Baghdad," and over his shoulder you could literally see them rolling into the city. And he's going, "No, there are no tanks in Baghdad." These people remind me very much of him.
So, will it change?
Oh, it is changing. Yeah. I mean, there will always be the last outposts there that will pretend it's not happening. And the thing is, we are not saying this for our benefit. I turn down most speaking engagements and things because I just don't want to do them and don't have the time. It's not for our benefit that we're saying that they need to let indie authors in. We're saying it because readers want them there, because the festivals and the organisations that allow them in do far better, and it's better for the industry as a whole not to be in a silly kind of insular war. Readers don't care. If you've got a book that's got a great looking cover, that is edited well, that's got a great story, the marketing argument is an interesting one as well, because of course indie authors market their books. They have to. How on earth is anyone else going to know the book exists if you don't market it? You can't just write it and just leave it and expect people to find it. It's not going to happen. So yes, marketing is a part of it, and publishers will market books as well. But a well-marketed poor book won't do well.
Well, being devil's avocado for just a second, I've heard an argument put forward by publishers that, of course, there are an awful lot of companies out there who prey on the fantasy of bringing people's books to the public and making them bestsellers and charge an awful lot of money for it. And that's often brought forward as a case by publishers to say that, well, how do you regulate that? How do you regulate quality when you've got these charlatans offering the world? They do it in lots of different professions. They'll do it in learn how to sell stock to make $1 million. Every industry has its equivalent of that, but those sort of publishing organisations are often cited as sort of filling certainly the electronic book market with inferior products.
I completely agree, and they should be banned, quite frankly. I've spoken out about them against them a number of times, these companies that charge people to publish books, because there are two ways of publishing. You can either write your book and hand it to a traditional publisher who will pay you some money in the form of an advance, publish the book, and then pay your royalty on copies sold thereafter. Or you can publish independently, which means that you do the bits that the publisher would do, So you hire the editor, you hire the cover designer, you do the work that they would do or organise for it to be done, and you keep all of the royalties afterwards. So the investment is yours. This other model, whereby there are companies who will charge you to publish your book. They'll say, we need an investment of this for marketing, and we're talking thousands quite a lot of the time. I get emails from people all the time who they start off paying a couple £100, and before they know it, they got sucked into the dream and they end up paying £25,000. Completely not unusual. I've heard that at least a dozen times. It's wrong, and authors get sucked into doing this. Either, you put the book out there, you have control, you keep all the intellectual property rights, or you hand that over in exchange for them paying you money. You don't give somebody your book and pay them money for it. And if any budding authors out there are listening to this and have come across these companies where you pay them to put your book out there, please don't touch them with a barge pole.
Just get the books that teach you how to do it yourself, and go to the best recommendations for professionals who will help you bring your book to the. If you're not putting your money into, but we all put money into our career. Certainly, the initial stages, we have to do it. We have to invest. You have to speculate to accumulate.
And I'll get flack for saying it. I always do, and I always get a message from a publisher who will say, well, actually, we have this model, but we do it in an ethical way, and what have you. Fair enough, it's still completely not needed as a business model at all, I would argue, and I just don't want people to get ripped off.
There's another thing as well, because how can you tell what is an indie book when you get at the point of purchase?
You can't.
You can't. One thing you might be able to, and this is where there is a strong stranglehold, and I understand where it comes from, and that is getting top critics to get into the Times, all these sort of top reviews, so they can say Sunday Times says, Telegraph says this.
But who reads those reviews?
Well, I know, but a lot of people do.
Authors,
and I understand
authors and publishers and agents.
And I
it's an industry
that they have
circle
the power. Certainly the big publishing houses have the power to actually present their books, and reviewers and critics will actually look to books that come from an established, very well-known publishing house, and probably put their books before any other books coming in, and they'll just say we won't review indie books. So, but I still think it can be a powerful tool. I mean, if your book is reviewed by Sunday Times, and you have something like Sunday Times, a good review in the Sunday Times, or the New York Times, or what have you, then that is going to be helpful, certainly, because people do look at that and they go, well, that's what that respected organ has actually said about this book, and they really like it. I think I'm going to get that. Do indies have access to those sort of reviews?
Generally not, no, but
the growing number of reviewers online.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and that's where that's where the readers go. Generally speaking, yes, getting reviewed by the New York Times might well help, but even if you're traditionally published with a big author, the chances of that happening are slim, and those sorts of things are necessary for traditionally published authors to sell the volume of books they need to make money. Most traditionally published authors I know work other jobs. Yeah. They have to, because even though they're these big names and they're selling all of these books, I mean, for example, the average wage for a traditionally published author with an active publishing contract, so they are they're the cream of the crop, if you like, the average wage is around £10,000 a year in terms of what they actually earn.
Yes,
which is below minimum wage, and these are the people who have effectively made it, and who these publishers and who these organisations and festivals are saying, these are the absolute top, the elite, and they're being paid below minimum wage. The industry has been in a mess for a while, and it is now righting itself, and there are still people who don't want to see that equilibrium achieved. And it's a sad thing, but you know what? It's happening. It's happened. And
do they feel threatened? Do they?
Of course, and I can completely understand that. The publishing industry has.
They will say they don't feel threatened. They'll just say no, but
of course,
we know.
Yeah, well,
we are the arbiters of taste and whatever, because we know. I understand. I mean, I can see
the people who know are the readers and the market. That's who knows.
Yeah, that's true. What an interesting conversation
it is, isn't it?
Yes, but I hope we can get down to a subject that is a little less intelligently demanding. But I doubt that we will. I mean, I think that's absolutely fascinating, and obviously it's. I mean, you speak very eloquently about it from your side of the industry, and I'm sure we'll get some responses on Partners in Crime from other people giving other points of view, which is the point of Partners in Crime. It's not all about us sitting here recommending the next great book, and some people may just say, do you recommend indie books? Oh, of course we do.
Yeah.
We recommend books by indie authors and from established publishing houses of great renown.
We don't even look at who publishes them.
No, we don't. We just
it's irrelevant.
No, we don't. We get them, we read them, and we recommend them because we love the genre above necessarily the way the books come to market.
Exactly.
But and so many of our listeners. So shall we get on to some recommendations?
Well, yes. I mean, before that, I was going to, while we were talking about festivals, we mentioned the last few shows about the Amptil Literary Festival.
Oh yeah.
And we mentioned the link with Amptil and with crime and mystery in the last episode, didn't we?
Oh, we did. Yes, it did.
And we had a few messages from people, including Maria Simons on YouTube, who said, was it Kit Williams' Masquerade, where you had to discover where a bejeweled rabbit was buried? We were talking about this great mystery that's linked with Amptil, weren't we, last week?
We certainly were.
And I can tell that I've thrown you a curveball here.
No, because in actual fact, I know the answer to that.
You know the story.
I've just hit that one out of the park. I do. I've got it. I've got 2 copies of Masquerade at home.
Do tell us. For listeners who've never heard of Kit Williams' Masquerade, as I hadn't until I moved to the area a few years ago.
It's a sculptured hare, and there's a representation on it on the library in Amptil. And Kit Williams hid this sculpture, this precious sculpture, on an Amptil, pretty much on the site that Catherine of Aragon had her castle. There's none of that, no sign of that castle left, but that's where it once stood after she sort of had that slight falling out with Henry VIII. And so it's
how did that end, by the way?
Well, better for Catherine of Aragon than it did for Anne Boleyn. But I think so. He found this site, and he wrote this book with lots of clues as to where this treasure could be found, and they weren't easy. And it sort of caught the nation's imagination many years ago, 25, 30 years ago, isn't it? And eventually it was found. Someone deduced that it was buried in Amptil Great Park, which is this lovely park, which we're very fortunate to have near us. And that's the big mystery. It was in all the papers, and the book is absolutely charming. And there's going to, as I say, Amptil is celebrating Masquerade, its anniversary this year in various ways. So look out for that on the internet, or if you're local, or if you feel like flying in from Vancouver or Fiji, you'll be very, 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 very welcome. But so that's the great mystery. So I think there is a mug going to that.
Oh, you're giving away mugs. This is costing me
we
tenner
did.
Plus shipping every time you do this.
But look at my face. Do I look as if I care? Do I look as if I care? I think you've had enough moaning this episode. You can actually send out
my punishment.
A mug. Not any old mug. It's got to be a Partners in Crime one. It can't be.
That's my old Arsenal one.
I love my mum. No, it's got to be one of those. So that's our winner. Congratulations,
excellent.
By the way.
Yes, well done, Maria. On the subject of the Amptil Literary Festival as well, we are both speaking there on a panel on Saturday the 27th of April. Yeah. So yeah, please do come along. Please do get tickets. Wonderful festival, indie friendly, pays its speakers, and in fact, the panel we're on, there's 3 indie crime and mystery writers on that panel. So wonderful festival, and very, very much looking forward to attending it. Not least because I'll actually be able to walk there.
That helps.
It does.
But I bet you don't. I bet you could, in theory, walk there, Adam Croft. But do you honestly think you will?
I probably should, he says, looking down at his belly.
Well, okay. Well, I'll check on the day, and I'll have that verified by your wife.
Check my red cheeks, and I'll turn up.
Did Adam actually walk, or did you give him a lift? The truth will come out, but there will...
No, I'll be driving. She'll be giving me a lift back because there's a bar there.
Right, fair enough. That's good enough. Now, we are a crime pod, and it's quite interesting because this is breaking news, which is... I've just got a message from my
reporter on the ground.
Yeah, which is quite interesting. Where is it? Yes, it's from my mother. Hi, Bob. We're in London at Katie's flat, out in a cafe now. Stay tuned, are you hooked so far? Well, last night there was a buzz on the bell, and Philippa answered it. It was 10 armed police officers who dashed to the top flat. Forensics arrived, and a policeman is guarding the door to the flat. Gosh. Next instalment when we know further. Well, that was an independently published email. So that's all kicking off in London now. So that's a true life crime. I'm fascinated to find out what it is, and I hope everyone seems to be okay, especially as they're out at the local cafe having a donut and a cappuccino. So it can't be that bad. But 10 officers late at night.
Well, maybe they're looking for you. Maybe it's crimes against literature.
Oh, no, see, I was there last week. You see, they've been misinformed. This is Line of Duty gone wrong.
That's exactly what I was about to say. That's my next little note here.
Well, don't tell me, because I haven't seen the second one. I haven't seen the second one yet. Don't spoil.
Oh, you should catch up. The third one will be out in 2 days' time. Right. It's it's getting better and better. It's hotting up, as it always tends to. I'm sure we'll talk about it every week for the next 3 or 4.
We will do. It's the new engrenage, is it not? The new spiral.
Yeah, except slightly cheaper for me. The Line of Duty is on Netflix worldwide, I believe, if you want to catch up with the first few series, or the current series on the BBC iPlayer, and presumably also BBC Worldwide. It's their flagship show at the moment, so I presume they're pushing out everywhere for worldwide viewers.
I hope so.
Yeah, well worth watching, and for you wherever you are in the world. Do you have a book recommendation this week?
Well, I've got an interesting thing. Our dear friend Craig Sisterton, who regular listeners will know very well, who's a terrific critic and reviewer of books, and flies the flag for Southern Hemisphere crime fiction in New Zealand and Australia. He dropped us a line a little while ago, and I'll read out what he said. Hi Bob, how are you? Hope you're all right. Hope Adam's well too.
That's a great email.
That's a great one. But we'll cut to the thing.
Thanks, Craig.
He was recommending a book called The Sound of a Voice, which is a New Zealand author's book, which is debuting over here in May, and he has recommended this to us wholeheartedly. A book by Nathan Blackwell. He says The Sound of a Voice is a really interesting debut. It delves deeply into the impact of investigating violent crime on police officers, and is a kind of police procedural blended with a bit of Shakespearean tragedy, downward spiral of a hero kind of stuff. It covers many years of the main character's police career rather than a single case. Orion UK are publishing it over here, and Nathan Blackwell is coming over to take part in Newcastle Noir. That's an excellent festival, crime fiction festival, quite obviously in Newcastle, and that's in May. Craig says he's a terrific talent and a really fascinating guy to chat to. So would you recommend his book? Well, I'll tell you a little bit about it. It says, some murder cases you can't forget, no matter how hard you try. For Detective Matt Buchanan, it is the death of a 14-year-old called Samantha Coates, that innocent girl he just can't get out of his head. He has probably been in the job too long, but when Buchanan pursues some fresh leads, it soon becomes clear he's on the trail of something big. As he pieces the horrific crimes together, Buchanan finds the very foundations of everything he once believed in start to crumble. He's forced across the grey line that separates right and wrong into places so dark even he might not make it back. The Sound of a Voice is an authentic, gritty, character-led police procedural by an elite former detective. So Nathan knows of what he speaks. For fans of Ian Rankin, Stuart McBride and Joseph Knox. Now that is going to be published over here on April the 18th. So where could you get your copy of The Sound of Her Voice?
I would highly recommend doing so from Kobo. They're very kind sponsors of this podcast, and also big champions of indie authors. Slip that one in there as well.
Yeah, he's not letting this one go easily.
I'm like a dog with a bone. If you fancy getting that book, or any others that we speak about on this episode, or any others, if you're a new listener to Partners in Crime, head over to kobo.com and enter the promo code CRIME at the checkout, and those very nice people over at Kobo will give you 90% 40% off of your first ebook purchase from them. If you're an existing Partners in Crime listener, then find the books you want at kobo.com and enter the promo code PARTNERS at the checkout. That will give you 40% off of all of your purchases for life. Which is at least until the end of the year anyway, which is when our sponsorship expires and renews.
Yes.
So 40% off of all your reading through 2019. How about that?
How's that for value? And how's this for a segue? Nathan Blackwell is a 2 times winner of the Neo Marsh Awards, which is New Zealand's top crime fiction award. And for those of you who love Neo Marsh, and if you'd like to find out more about her work and that of many of her contemporaries, may Partners in Crime recommend a visit to the British Library this June. The Golden Age Detective Fiction Conference is at the British Library. The British Library is holding their 5th annual Bodies from the Library Conference. Did you see what they did there? Bodies from the Library Conference, celebrating the Golden Age of detective fiction. Ideal for fans of Agatha Christie and her contemporaries, Neo Marsh, Dorothy L. Sayers, John Dixon Carr, Marjorie Allingham, the Detective Club, or if you want to discover forgotten authors from the period. A one-day conference with an exciting programme of discussions, presentations and panels on the golden age of detective fiction writers, giving you a chance to meet leading experts on classic detective fiction and talk with modern authors whose novels follow in the golden age tradition. All this in the amazing surroundings of the British Library. So there we are. If you're in the UK, you live in the UK or are visiting the UK in June, why not give that a go? 29th of June 2019, and I'd get booked in pretty swiftly because I should imagine tickets will be going very fast.
Yeah, that does sound fascinating. Well, it appears we've reached the end of another episode. 60 down, many more to go, hopefully.
So really, basically, we've celebrated our 60th episode by having a damn good moan.
Yeah, we're having a whinge.
Having a whinge. Well, that's... Yeah. Some people, some unkind people would say that's typically British. But I don't think it is. No. I think whinges can actually lead to very productive outcomes.
Well, let's hope so, yeah. Yes. Let's see where it goes. Do you have much planned for the weekend?
What am I doing for the weekend? This weekend is fairly free. I've got a lot of work to do because I've got 2 shows to prepare. I'm doing the PG Woodhouse, and I'm also doing an audience with in May. So there's quite a lot of going on in that department, and of course I've got a book to get out there.
Yes.
But I'll have a chat with you over my next... It's green tea this week, listeners. Not coffee. I'm just sort of being a bit sort of out there, a bit woo and a bit woo and a bit way. And it's delicious, and he makes as good a green tea as he does a cup of coffee.
Well, we've got to have our talent somewhere, haven't we? I think after that episode, filled with debate and heavy opinion, I think I'm now going to go and turn off my Twitter notifications.
Yes, and I'm going to go and have a nice lie down.
Partners in Crime was presented by Adam Croft and Robert Dawes and produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Beisch. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.